Hey everyone, it's LS, and this is the patch 7.24b notes rundown. I guess that they're just holding off on a larger patch, and Season 8's still not quite here yet. So we're just going to jump right into this and just look at all the changes, and then talk about how some of them just don't make any sense to me, and, go from there. Atrox base stats, 68 to 70. Dark Flight goes up by 10, 15, and then 20. Alright, so, that's some pretty good scaling base damage on the Q. I don't think that that's really Atrox's problem. Atrox's problem is that his passive is extremely unreliable. His dueling potency is sort of lackluster unless he's ahead. When he's ahead, he is really oppressive, but then it's also kind of easy to play around unless he's really, really far ahead, but then the same can be said for a lot of champions, so it's not really that impressive. Blades of Torment damage also goes up a little bit. It's nice little super minor buffs, but I don't think it really addresses the main problem that Atrox is having. Jace, Shock Blasts. So he ends up losing quite a lot of base damage. The Thundering Blows cooldown is also up quite a lot. This obviously helps with playing around Jace in lane. I don't think that it'll actually impact the super high level Jaces. It obviously is going to help against his oppression in laning phase when he is already ahead of you, because it's going to be a lot more difficult now in order for him to zone you off of waves and go, all in on combos when he already has an HP lead on you, and just play the lane in a very bully type fashion. I think that extremely high level Jaces are still going to be really fine with picking him. He'll still be a situational pick. But outside of that, everyone else is just going to get impacted negatively. Sort of reminds me of the Katarina nerfs a really, really long time ago, where Katarina was nerfed, and yet there were still some players at really high MMR that were still completely fine with making her work, but other players definitely suffered from it. Kayn. Okay, so base attack damage growth, he ends up getting like a longsword now at max level. Passive, the Darkened Scythe. So this is only for, Rost. Yeah, okay. So the Rost spell vamp versus champions is up a little bit. But I don't think that's really what's holding Rost or Kayn back. I think that a lot of the problems that has to do with Kayn has to do with his early game passive, the fact that it doesn't really kick into gear until around 10 minutes. He is quite good with some of the changes that did happen to the jungle, because if junglers are gank centric and they end up having to gank, or if Kayn didn't have the luxury of being able to reliably gank some lanes or something, which is kind of difficult given his D. Kayn can actually get really far ahead because he is one of the best speedy power farmers in the game, and going through walls and stuff and counter jungling, it helps him in that regard. Still doesn't help the fact that he can't transform for a really long time unless opponents make a really, really big mistake. A lot of his ganks are able to be played around because even though he is flexible and he does have terrain scaling, he has the best terrain scaling out of any jungler in the game, it still hurts him a lot more than most junglers if he goes for a gank and fails, or if he goes for a gank and waits. He's not a champion that really likes to have any downtime, and if he does have downtime, then he falls really far behind. Shadow Kayn has like a really big wake up in mid game, and then obviously late game he can still feel really good. In fact, I think that there was a certain point in the meta where there were so many ranged champions in so many lanes, and they were all so squishy, that Shadow Kayn was actually pretty okay, even in higher MMR solo queue. But I think in competitive, both of Kayn's forms are just a little bit unfortunate. And I think that the only way that you make Kayn work right now in competitive is similar to like... He's like a better version of Shaco in a way, where if you're really good at him and your team maybe has a lot of practice with him or something, then you can probably make him work and, pick up some surprises against players. But he's not a champion that really stands out compared to the other junglers in his field. Clad, base stats. So he gets 2 base attack damage, and then he too basically gets a longsword later on. E-jousting, the damage is up a little bit. This is going to help out Clad. Clad is a champion that I think is also helped out by some other changes inside of this this patch, so really like to see that, because Clad's a champion that I think is actually really interesting, and I think that he's pretty healthy for the game, so pretty okay. Changes, it's not going to like blow him out of the water and suddenly make him appear every single game, but it's definitely going to be noticeable. Renekton, base stats. Base attack damage 66 to 69, and then attack damage growth is... That growth is actually kind of noticeable. It definitely will help him. Again, same thing with Clad, and so we'll probably end up seeing Renekton. So the difference between Clad and Renekton is Renekton primarily sees a resurgence when other things in the meta fall into place that don't necessarily pertain to Renekton himself. He's sort of like a Sivir in that regard. Other champions that fall under this are that I talk about sometimes. That are present in like mid and bot lane and whatnot. Callista occasionally was a victim of this type of a thing for a little while, but Renekton's interesting. He'll be used as a counter pick. The buffs that aid him in that regard are definitely going to be really good. And then again, we're going to get to the changes that happened with Tiamat and Titanic Hydra later on. Although Renekton doesn't really make use of the Titanic as much as Ravenous in most cases. Although the thing with Ingenious Hunter is actually really interesting, I guess primarily for him. But then again, the Ravenous might just actually be too good for him if he ends up going into the Domination tree. So don't know exactly how that works out. It really depends what type of build he's going and what the team compositions are. Okay, Teemo, health growth stat. So okay, base attack damage 58 to 54. None of this really matters because Teemo needs a rework. So I don't really... I'm hesitant to really talk about any changes that pertain to the champion. The champion's really, really bad against competent players. He scales... he's better the worse the overall teams are. Realistically, you shouldn't be able to get away with a mushroom-heavy base playstyle. The on-hit playstyle is inferior to some other split pushers. There's very, very few things that he actually does better than other champions, and even in those areas where he does stuff better, there's so many things that he just does worse. Versus good players, he doesn't almost win really any lane, even in matchups that he should win, primarily because the junglers have a brain. And it's very easy to skew the Teemo lane matchups with the current items that exist in the game, and you can just basically make him useless and hand off the lane to your laner to always just win a one-on-one. Even in lanes that Teemo should be considered countering. And so, I mean, that in itself is just really pathetic. I know that some people are going to have a knee-jerk reaction to this, that there are Teemos that climbed really high, with certain builds and play styles, and that doesn't have anything to do really with the balance of the champion. It has to do with the players that are playing against him, and the players in the game as a whole are all just terrible. So, it's not a testament to Teemo's balance. There's a reason that this champion was never picked in competitive. There's a reason that the champion never really existed in really high RMR in Korea, and it's because he just doesn't make the cut in a lot of areas. And so when I see champions get hit with nerf bats and stuff, it really just doesn't make sense to me. I know that I can refer to the Reddit post that Riot made when it comes to balancing and stuff, but I still just really can't understand it. Why you would provide handicaps or crutches in areas that are basically just enabling poor play, rather than nerf Teemo. Maybe just I don't even know how to approach that. That's an entirely different subject in itself. So we'll just move on. Yasuo base stats: magic growth 0.5 to 1.25. That's actually pretty big. Steel Tempest gets base scaling on it, ends up getting 20 extra damage at max strength. That's actually pretty big. Last breath cast range 1200 to 1400. Nice little Yasuo changes. These are actually really, really weird, though. Yasuo is in a really unique spot where you have to be really, really careful with balancing him and any changes that come with him, because he's either overpowered or he's always underpowered. There's very, very few times where he's going to really be inside of a gray area in regards to team compositions or something. So this is another champion that I can understand the hesitation with any really big changes when it comes to him. So I think that's completely fine. Okay, some of the items. Tiamat, 20 to 25 damage. That's actually really that's actually really big. Okay, Titanic Hydra, 35 to 40. Okay, Ravenous Hydra, attack damage is unchanged. Okay, so I mean this change is really, really big, and I mean we talked about Clad, we talked about Renekton. This is fantastic for them. It's also really good for Fiora, the Tiamat change. So I mean I think this is really, really nice. That's really nice, yeah. Giant Slayer, 1,000 to 2,000 health difference for max damage. Lord Dominic's Regard, 1,000 to 2,000 for max damage. That, that's a bit extreme. It's really a bit extreme. Yeah, I'm just not going to comment on that. Lethality items. We added 2 lethality items to the serrated Dirk items when preseason begins, but it turns out we probably didn't need to. This is a hit to Pantheon, by the way, in case we're control effing him. Serrated Dirk, lethality 12 to 10, Duskblade of Drakta. This is weird too. Lethality, I mean, they mentioned Pantheon in the notes here, okay? But the thing is there's very few lethality champions that are actually really good right now. Edge of Night is a complete joke in its current state, just because other items that you need for certain points of the game are just more valuable, and it's not providing enough right now in its current state. The serrated Dark change is bizarre. I could see if like Graves was really, really popular, or if Kayn was really popping off and Kayn was making a lot of use of these items. This entire patch just reeks of North America to me. A lot of the changes that are present in them just seems like it has to do with a lot of the complaining that's been public on Reddit. And, you know, when I see stuff like that, it immediately brings me back to balance patches that occurred in other video games. And it just reminds me of the players that were incompetent and unwilling to actually improve at the game in order to match an opposing player in a certain area. That the game was changed and it was more catered for them so that they could actually just not have to learn to overcome their own weaknesses. And they could just play against it. So rather than learn how to lane against Pantheon, which, by the way, Pantheon is pretty easy to learn how to lane against, or rather than, you know, learn how to play against these lethality-based champions or something, they instead, Riot just nerfs it. And it just doesn't make any sense because there's already... I get really, really mad when balanced is approached this way. Because I've seen what this type of stuff has done elsewhere, most notably StarCraft 2, when you try to fix things that aren't broken. And it immediately makes me think of StarCraft 1 and what would have happened when Western players couldn't mute a micro as good as Korean Zergs. So would you nerf the Terran? Would you nerf the Terran push? And if you guys are unfamiliar with StarCraft or something, Terran and Zerg are 2 races in the video game, and Terran was known for having a timing attack. So imagine just an attack that occurs at a certain minute in the game. And basically the way that the Zerg would resist it was with very pristine muta control, like controlling your unit really, really, really well. And if the Zerg did not have a certain level of micro, they would always succumb to the push. They would always have to tap out, and it was always just GG. So basically what it's like looking at is, and this was very evident, by the way, there was a player back in the name named TOT Rhett, and I think every single foreign Zerg I just saw him play against just always just fucking lost at 10 minutes. Demonetized, by the way. But anyways, rather than the Western players have to get better at Mutalisk micro, instead, Blizzard would come along and they would nerf the Terran units so that the Western idiots don't have to get better at Muta micro. But what does that do for the actual elite and highest level of the game, where we already saw, and it was already established, that the Terran push was not necessarily overpowered? We already saw that there are dozens and dozens, and I mean even hundreds of players that clearly could resist the push because they were good enough at controlling the units. So the Terran push wasn't really imbalanced, it wasn't overpowered, you just had to get good. That was just all that it was. And there's always going to be a trade-off in some areas. I absolutely abhor when changes in balance stuff is approached from this manner. It's the most disgusting thing in the world, and it further just keeps players from ever improving or ever having to identify and realize their own shortcomings as players and weaknesses. And I mean, you can preach to me, you can preach to the choir about how, balance doesn't need to happen for the highest MMR and blah, blah, blah. Listen, if you're that low of MMR, you don't even realize what balance is going on, okay? Just like the Riven placebo nerfs or the placebo buffs or something where, Riven was changed and everyone was like, oh yeah, Riven, these changes are great. Changes didn't go live yet. you are incapable of realizing the nerfs and buffs that occur if you're truly that low MMR. I'm sorry. Like, you are. Alright? Alright? Alright. Reality Denial 2.0. Anyways, mid lane. Okay, let's talk about Azir. Azir is disgusting, by the way. I just have to point this out. He's had a gigantic rise of power lately. In the sense that I'm just seeing him so much. Everyone's picking him. He's back to his oppression level. He seems a lot more easy to pilot because so many players are just, they're doing stuff with him. And maybe it's just the fact that he's been out for so long. But he's really, really, really strong and very, very obnoxious. There's actually very few things in the game I think that are as scary as a true late game Azir right now. And I actually do like that. His kit is advanced, he is complex, he's a champion that rewards high mechanical ability, good decision making, thinking on the fly, and I love champions like that. Sort of like how I love Zoe. Alright? Now, W or Rise damage changed. He ends up losing 20 damage at level 12, and I think that that's okay. And then at level 18, it looks like he ends up losing about 20 damage as well. So, not the end of the world. Azir is usually overkilling targets anyway. When he puts someone into the lethal range, they're likely dying just because of the nature of how he deals out his damage in the combos. And just the way that he engages. So I don't think this is going to be the end of the world for Azir. But anyways, Cassiopeia, Q, Noxious Blast. But anyway, Azir I think needs other changes that are not just this W or Rise change. Maybe he is fine in a completely controlled setting. I'm hesitant to say that. Actually, you know what? No, I'm hesitant to say that he needs other changes. I might. It's really interesting. Azir is. I think this change for now is okay, but I do think that likely something else is truly going to be needed. So let's move on to Cassiopeia. Q Noxious Blast, 60 to 80 mana scaling to 50 to 70 mana scaling. Okay. So she gets a little bit more spam ability inside of her kit now. E Twin Fang, damage versus poison targets 10 to 90 plus 0.5 ability power to 0.6 ability power. So Cassiopeia actually was buffed. This is a champion that kind of disappeared for a little while, at least in the mid lane. Haven't actually seen her in quite some time, at least not in solo queue. I mean, occasionally she pops up her head and whatnot, but she definitely did go down for a little bit. I don't think these changes necessarily are going to help her out massively, but she will obviously greatly accept the buffs, and I think that, we'll occasionally see Cassiopeia come back when the meta, again, changes a little bit more. This is, again, Cassio is a champion that when her numbers are too strong, then she's going to be picked a lot more frequently than she should. Realistically, she's a champion, much like Renekton, much like Sivir, that comes into the meta mostly because of other champions existing in the meta and how she fits into that puzzle as an answer to some of the things that are present. So, with that being said, this will definitely help her come back when she does need to come back. Now, okay, here's another, kind of a change. Base attack damage 63 to 60, huge Trinity Force nerf. Attack damage growth 3.5 to 3, huge Trinity Force nerf. So not only did he just lose a ton of value on his Sheen, he lost a lot of value on the Trinity Force once he completes it, and the Prosperous Braum is now losing 20 base damage as well. And it's just kind of like, why? Like, where on earth are these Corki nerfs coming from? What is causing these Corki nerfs? I can't tell you guys. And I've played something like, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred games in the last, month and a half or something. Not a couple hundred, well, maybe 2, I don't know. I don't know how many times I saw Corki. He just seems really dead. And even looking at higher MMR or something, he's only really picked as a no-theme mid-laner champion pick when the enemy team composition is really prone to sustained poke, ranged magic damage, and in very specific matchups in mid lane. Yes, he is a versus all champion in a sense, especially if the enemy mid laner has already been picked. There are some matchups that are really good against Corki, but these changes just come completely out of left field. It just doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, and I really can't understand it. So I don't know. Katarina, E Shunpo damage. Another change that's just she's not picked in competitive ever. She's very seldom seen at really high MMR, and the people that do win with her at high MMR, and the people that do pub stomp with her throughout, like just blitzing through tiers when they get a new ID or something, are people that are proficient at her. They have a very high potency level on Katarina. They're Katarina specialists. So when you're talking about that, you're talking about a champion that doesn't get a lot of playtime. And so when you have these one tricks, or when you have these people that specialize in her, play her against people that are not accustomed to seeing her, that are unfamiliar with the champion, and we're not even just talking about strictly in the mid one-on-one matchup. We're talking about AD carries and supports that aren't used to a Katarina being in the game. They're not used to playing against a champion that roams so frequently. They're not used to a champion with so much mobility. And it doesn't make any sense to me how a change like this is targeted at a subgroup of players that play the champion rather than the champion itself. Because I think that we've already identified that, again, yes, the champion is not that good. The champion's very easy to play around, kind of a big wind-up, very easy to shut down, very easy to manage, and competitive, extremely difficult to pull off. Even when Katarina was at one of her heights, mostly the only Korean mid laner that was willing to even pick her was, in fact, Faker. So it's just another change that is really just out there, and I just can't understand it. Now, is this kind of a damage loss going to kill her? Absolutely not. But it still doesn't change the fact that she needs buffs, but she falls into that, that gray area thingy where you can't really buff her too much because her kit is so uncontrollable, and she does have a lot of utility inside of her kit and stuff. And so it sort of like falls into the Zoe, the Kassadin, the Yasuo, and other champions like that. But yeah, okay. Let's move on to Zoe. Q Paddle Star. When Zoe casts R Portal Jump while a Paddle Star is active, the star's travel range now changes when Zoe reappears at the cast location rather than as soon as Portal Jump is cast. The timing of Zoe's QQR combo is less forgiving. Okay, I mean, that's completely fine. So they're adding more mechanics to the champion. I'm never going to be opposed to that. So I think that's okay. Bot lane. The damage is being thrown around bot lane is a bit too high for our liking, and a large part of that is the combination of sorcery poke and the all-in strength of lethality marksman. Okay, well, MF. I get, okay, MF. A part of that, well, MF and Jhin. On the poke end, Misfortune is spamming Make It Rain. Arcane Comet procs a bit too enthusiastically. Okay. Leality changes were mentioned above. Cover the marksman side of the issue. Base stats: attack speed growth 2.8 to 1.5%. Okay, that's not what's making Ezreal problematic by any means. Leona Q Shield of Daybreak, bonus damage 30 to 130 scaling to 10 to 110. That's really big. That's a lot of damage missing early on. That's really a lot of damage. And, the reason that I say that it's a lot of damage is because it takes away from Leona's identity, where she wants to engage, she wants to go on you, she has to win these trades. And when you gut her that much damage early on, it really makes me question, like, what is going on? Because now, how do you want her to be picked? Is she still going to be able to all-in some of the champions? Yeah, absolutely she will. But you're really taking away from some of her, pre-mid-game identity as a character, and that doesn't make sense. And again, like, why are we having to do this? Do I think that she maybe is a little bit too strong in some situations? Yes. Do I think this is probably the way to approach her Q thing? No. I don't think that taking away the damage is good. I hesitate to even suggest something, but maybe the cooldown stuff would have been a little bit better. But, yeah. 20 damage level 1, and that just seems way too extreme. That just seems way, way, way too extreme. Okay, Misfortune, Make It Rain. Cooldown 14 to 10 seconds to 18 to 10 seconds. It's big. I don't think it's game-shattering. And the reason that I don't think that it's game-shattering is you're not always casting it off cooldown 100% of the time. Sometimes, yes, when you have priority in lane and you're ahead and stuff and you're looking to really just, add salt to the wound or whatever, you will be casting it off cooldown, but not always. So in some cases, it's more so going to be like a 2-second cooldown addition throughout some levels in certain battle lane matchups, but I don't think it's going to kill her. But again, I don't like that they targeted a skill when it's really a keystone that is causing problems, and the keystone isn't just causing a problem inside of Misfortune, it's causing problems across many, many champions. And so now, if in the future the keystone ends up getting hit, and they end up forgetting about the change that they made to compensate for the existence of the keystone on that champion, then I think that more problems end up arising. Okay, same stuff as above, but this time we'll call Jhin for the Control F crew. Yeah, I just don't like this. I don't like the lethality changes at all. Jhin is really nice, and Jin's kit is really beautiful, but I don't think that the lethality stuff needed to be targeted as heavily as it did, especially because this is just sort of ridiculous. Edge of Night is almost never being built, so you're talking about 2 lethality items. We are only realistically talking about the loss of 4 lethality, but still, it's definitely going to be felt. Okay, Ramus. Okay, sorry, Ramus, you didn't fit into any of the sections. Hope that's okay. This is a champion that's never picked. Or at least, I don't know how he's doing on North America or EU. Something that's really surprising to me, though, is Xin Zhao. Korea still hasn't picked up Xin Zhao, but North America, I believe, is still picking him, and they still are Xin Zhao enthusiasts. So I don't know how he goes completely unnoticed inside of this entire list. But Ramus can end up getting nerfed. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, sorcery rooms. Sorcery bonus path, 15 attack damage, 25 ability power, adaptive, 12 attack damage, or 20. That's completely fine. I think that's that's completely fine. Monopole ban, 60 seconds to 75 seconds. Okay, Scorch. Okay, this changes the weirdest thing in the world. You don't pick Scorch for mid-game or late game. You only pick Scorch for early game, and even early game, it's oppressive, but it's not the end of the world. And I think I talked about this before elsewhere, that it doesn't make any sense to me to address it in such a harsh manner. Taking 10 damage off it, level 1, I mean, it's just like the Leona thing. I think that it's a really, really big overshot. Like, if they were really gonna take this approach, then maybe like 5 damage would have been suffice, but I don't know. I don't like that. All right, so let's just recap really quick. Atrox buffs are not enough. Jace buffs, top level Jaces are still going to be fine. Kane's still a gimmick in himself. Clad and Renekton are the 2 best changes this entire patch. Teemo, it doesn't address like what really makes Teemo a problem, because Teemo is a problem in himself. He's a terrible champion, and if you're losing to Teemo and Teemo is actually causing problems in your game, then you're just bad players. Yasuo, magic resist. This is interesting. It's a very soft buff, and you know I can appreciate the hesitation to go any further on it, so I think that's okay. The lethality changes, not really a huge fan of it. I don't think that it'll actually kill the champions, but there are champions that are getting hit that don't deserve to be hit, so it's a little bit weird. Azir thing is okay. Cassiopeia changes knife. Corki and Katarina are just completely random out of left field. Zoe change is good. Ezreal change is a joke. Leona change I think is too severe. MF change is, so, you know, whatever. Ramus change is just like, what are you doing? Like, who just lost a Silver 2 promo? I need to know. I have to know the answer. Other changes down here are weird. Scorch change is just completely asinine. So, all right, that's it for the patch rundown. So I hope that you guys enjoyed that, and hopefully the Season 8 patch has a lot of good stuff in store.